Hey guys, today we're wandering down a moonlit path lined with cherry blossoms, where a samurai's daughter peers through a paper screen at the impossible. A foreign sailor who shouldn't be there and definitely shouldn't be staring back. You can smell the rice wine in the air, hear the whisper of a shamisen in the distance, and feel 1,000 years of tradition pressing down on your shoulders. You, my brave listener, are about to slip quietly into a world where honor comes before love, rules outweigh desire, and crossing a boundary, geographical or emotional, can get you exiled, or worse. You probably won't survive this, but I admire your optimism. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Let me know in the comments where you're listening from and what time it is. Now, dim the lights. Maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You first glimpse her in the port town of Shimoda. The year is 1854. Commodore Perry's black ships have recently steamed into Tokyo Bay, forcing Japan to open to the outside world after over 2 centuries of seclusion. You're part of the British Merchant Navy, a sailor still smelling faintly of salt and gunpowder, your boots thudding awkwardly against wooden planks that weren't built for foreigners. And then she passes by. A figure in indigo silk with a parasol tilted just enough to shield her eyes, but not her curiosity. She is the daughter of a low-ranking but proud samurai, assigned to observe the new Western presence under strict rules, speak only when spoken to, and only in matters of diplomacy. Love? Absolutely forbidden. And yet, there's a pause. One of those strange moments that history never accounts for. She looks. You look. The parasol tilts a hair lower, concealing the start of a smile. You have no idea what her name is, but you know it will ruin you. The town watches. Every step you take draws glances, whispers, and children bold enough to point. You lean against a merchant's stall, pretending to study lacquerware, while she turns the corner, disappearing down an alley you now burn to memorize. Historians still argue whether early foreign contact sparked admiration or resentment in Edo towns. But in your case, it's mostly awkward silence and being offered fish you're not sure is dead yet. But the next day, she's there again. This time near the temple, alone, and you risk it. A quiet nod. She doesn't flinch, doesn't smile either, but doesn't walk away. Communication is clumsy. You don't speak Japanese, she's not allowed to know English. Still, humans have been bridging language gaps for eons. You gesture toward a blossom above her head. She glances up. When her eyes return to yours, they linger, just a beat. By the third accidental meeting, you find a scrap of rice paper tucked inside your coat. Be careful, you are seen. You don't know if she wrote it herself or used a servant, but the message is unmistakably hers. You keep it. Back at your quarters, the other sailors are loud, drunk, and busy carving their initials into the inn's beams. You lie on your futon, rereading that message by lamplight. Her brush strokes are careful, refined, but you can feel the urgency behind them. Fun fact: samurai daughters in the mid-19th century often practiced calligraphy to such perfection that love letters could be identified by a single looped character. And if they were caught, the punishment ranged from arranged marriage to ritual disowning. Romantic, right? The next day, she doesn't come, nor the next. Your ship is due to leave in 4 days. Then, on the final afternoon, she's waiting. Not walking, waiting. By the well, no parasol. You approach slowly, breath caught in your throat like it's learned fear. She holds something, a small packet. She bows. You mimic it awkwardly, and she places the item in your palm without meeting your eyes. And just like that, she vanishes. Inside the packet, a pressed flower, a folded note, and a tiny sketch of a sailboat. Yours, you think. The note reads, "If you return, I will know. I will wait." You leave Japan with your heart in your boots. On the deck, watching the coastline fade, you ask a question you'll ask 100 times over the years. Was it real? Did she mean it? The 1850s were strange days for love. Long-distance romance was measured not in months but in wars. The Crimean War has just begun. Telegraph lines were years from linking continents. And you? You're just a sailor with a smuggled love letter in your boot. Back home in Portsmouth, England, everything smells wrong. The sea's still there, but the light's colder. You try to settle back in, even entertain a half-hearted courtship with the baker's niece. But no one writes like she did. No one walks like she did, like the ground had to earn her steps. You take on more voyages, Singapore, Batavia, Sydney, but your eyes always drift west, toward that little port where a girl with ink-stained fingers once broke every rule. You return to Japan 4 years later, older, with more scars and far fewer illusions. The British Navy has arranged a formal presence now, and you come not as a rogue wanderer, but as part of a sanctioned diplomatic crew. You wear better boots, your uniform is tighter across the shoulders. But the moment you step off the launch at Yokohama, it all feels familiar again. The scent of rain on cedar, the stiff silence in the faces of those who don't meet your eyes. You don't know if she's even here. Shimoda is far south, and your route isn't scheduled to pass near it. But by now you've learned the art of gentle sabotage. A few words to the ship's quartermaster, a small trade detour, suddenly your ship requires supplies from the coast you once fled with a pressed flower burning in your pocket. You arrive late in the day. The town has changed, a little more open, a little more tired, but the well is still there. And so is she. No parasol this time. No note, just her. She's not wearing silk, nothing delicate about her now. Her sleeves are rolled, her hair tied with a simple ribbon. But you'd know that posture anywhere. A perfect blend of watchfulness and restraint.
Like a candle trained never to flicker.
She doesn't speak when she sees you, not right away. But her breath catches. You catch it too. I remembered. You manage.
I did too.
She answers. And just like that, the world narrows to two people who probably shouldn't still care. Over the next few weeks, you both become absurdly good at finding quiet places. By the temple gate, behind the grain merchant's wall, under the eaves of the shrine at dusk. Always a risk, always worth it. You don't hold hands, not in public. But one night, you pass her a note wrapped around a piece of British chocolate. She opens it and laughs softly. The note simply says,
Still taste sweeter here.
You start writing more, carefully coded letters. You discuss weather, gardens, things that couldn't possibly sound romantic if intercepted. But between the lines, whole oceans of feeling swell, and yet storms are brewing. Not just emotional ones. The Tokugawa shogunate is weakening. Foreign powers circle like vultures. And British warships, yours included, are increasingly unwelcome. Historians still argue whether Western presence in late Edo Japan accelerated modernization or merely fractured its soul. But for you, it's simpler. The more of your kind that arrive, the more danger she's in. Then come the foreign soldiers, loud, armed, unsupervised. She stops meeting you at dusk. You get a message through a servant. It is not safe, my father watches. You try to write back, but the letters vanish. She doesn't come, you begin to worry, and then one afternoon you find her, waiting behind the shrine, wearing an expression you've never seen on her before. Fear.
He knows,
She whispers.
he read the note about the chocolate.
Your blood turns to seawater. What happens now? She closes her eyes. He's arranged for me to marry a merchant from Kyoto. It's already decided. You step back, say nothing. Because what is there to say? That you'll steal her away in the night? That you'll get her out on your ship like some smuggled cask of brandy? She looks at you like she hears all of that, and then says quietly, That's not our way. And you know she won't run. Not out of fear, out of loyalty, family, tradition. You nod, just once, then hand her a letter, the last one maybe. In it you promise nothing, except that you will remember her, always, and that if she ever needs you, truly needs you, she is to send only one word: oath. You leave Japan a week later with your fists clenched so tightly around nothing they ache. It rains the whole voyage back. The crew blames a typhoon, but you suspect the weather just has a sick sense of timing. Back in England, things start to blur. Time moves differently now. You take jobs. You get into a few fights. You try to forget her and fail spectacularly. Every woman you meet either speaks too fast or listens too little. None of them bow their heads before stepping into a room. You keep her letters in a tin box under your cot. Meanwhile, Japan transforms. The Meiji Restoration begins. Samurai are stripped of their status. The world she once belonged to is vanishing. Here's a strange tidbit. In the early 1870s, some former samurai sold their swords to tourists outside hotels, right next to imported whiskey stalls. And yet you wonder, did she survive that change? Did she marry the merchant? Did she become one of those women you read about in the papers, advocating for modern schooling, writing poems under pen names? Then, in the spring of 1875, you receive a letter. No return name, no embellishment, just one word. Oath. You sit in your bunk for almost an hour, holding the envelope like it might bite. Your hands tremble. You haven't cried in years, but tonight the tin box opens again. You book passage east the next day. Hong Kong is soaked in sweat, steam, and secrets. You arrive in the British colony not knowing who sent for you or why here, but you've traveled far enough, been ghosted by enough wars and women to know not everything arrives exactly where it started. Her name isn't in the letter. There's no address, just oath. You check into a creaky boarding house near the docks. The mattress is made of old rope and misplaced confidence. You sleep at fits, dreaming of parasols and pressed flowers, and wake up with the smell of camphor thick in your nose. By the third day, you begin asking questions, carefully. The colony is full of displaced people, wanderers who've lost countries, names, even timelines. You scan faces, listen for any sign of the soft Kyoto accent she once tried to hide. You finally meet an old Japanese trader in a tea shop near the Central Market. When you show him the envelope, he squints. She was here, a long time ago, taught girls, disappeared when the officials came. You press him. Where did she go? She left a message, said, "Tell him I went east, he'll understand." And you do. It's the route you once traced together in your letters, an imagined journey along the Chinese coast, across the islands, to the furthest edge of the old world. You book passage again, this time to Nagasaki. The trip is rough. A cyclone delays you a week, and a drunken officer tries to rob you mid-crossing. You break his nose. There's a moment afterward, staring at your own bruised knuckles, where you wonder what version of yourself she even remembers. Nagasaki is gentler, quieter. Westerners have a cautious tolerance now. The warships have mostly left. The lanterns still flicker the same way in the alleyways. You wander the temple district and pause beneath a torii gate. Someone has left a folded cloth at its base. You know it before you touch it. The stitching is hers. One edge of the fabric bears an embroidered sailboat, a near-identical one to the sketch she gave you 20 years ago. She's nearby. You follow a quiet trail, half instinct, half memory, up a forest path that smells of pine and rain-soaked stone. You reach a small inn hucked into the hill, where a woman in her middle years meets you with unreadable eyes. She said you would come, eventually. The room she gives you is simple, sparse, with a sliding door that opens to a garden of whispering bamboo. You wait there until nightfall, when a lantern glows behind the trees. She steps into view like she never left. She's older. So are you. The world has rewritten your faces, but nothing, not a single breath of space feels lost. "I thought maybe you would be too late," she says. "I almost was," you answer. You don't ask why she's alone. You don't need to. Her eyes hold the same quiet steel, but her shoulders seem lighter now, as if the weight of years finally found a shelf. You walk together through the garden. She tells you of her years teaching girls in Hong Kong, hiding her identity, avoiding curious men and dangerous ones alike. You speak of the sea, of merchant ships and mutinies, of lonely Christmases in foreign ports. "I never married," she says softly. You nod because neither did you. Fun historical fact. By the 1880s, the average British sailor had only a 20% chance of marrying due to constant deployment and low income. Romantic, right? The next morning, she brings you tea. You sit on the tatami mat in comfortable silence, just listening to the wind flicking through the garden. And then she says, "I need your help." A pause. "There is something I swore I would finish, but I cannot do it alone." You follow her down to the old quarter. A shrine sits nestled between two abandoned shops. Vines curl through the woodwork. Inside, a scroll rests beneath an altar, a family document. My father's final words. He wrote them before his death. He knew everything. You stiffen. He knew about us? She nods. And forgave me. But he asked one thing. She gently opens the scroll. The ink has faded, but the characters are strong. He asked that I burn this here when I knew I had no more to hide. And so, together, you build a small fire. She bows, recites a verse. And as the paper crumbles into ash, the past becomes light enough to carry. There's a tradition in some mountain shrines. When two people burn a sacred scroll together, it binds their souls as witnesses. Not lovers, not spouses, something deeper. You don't speak on the walk back, but your hands brush once, and neither of you flinch. That evening, over soup and sweet plums, she asks, "What now?" It's a good question. You don't belong here. She no longer belongs anywhere. The world has moved on, faster than either of you could follow. But there's a narrow place between duty and chance, where two people might rest for a while. She smiles. "I kept your chocolate wrapper," she says. You laugh harder than you have in years. You stay. Not forever, not in the way novels pretend forever works, but for as long as the weather holds and the days remain soft. You rent a modest room in Nagasaki near the harbor, close enough to hear the gulls, but far enough from the ships you no longer feel the urge to board. She comes by each morning with tea, sometimes miso, sometimes pickled plum. You spend long afternoons playing a lazy version of shogi she reteaches you every single time. You never win. On your 15th morning there, you find her in the garden, not tending flowers, but writing. A new habit. A memoir, maybe. A story. Or just pages she may never show to anyone. She looks up. It's about a man who never learned to bow properly. "I have bad knees," you say. It gets a smile. By late summer, word spreads that the old ways are vanishing fast. Shrines are being repurposed. Samurai names erased. Even the language is shifting. You hear English slang now in corners of town, clumsy and endearing. She hears it too and frowns. "We are vanishing," she whispers one evening. "Not dying, just dissolving." "Then let's write it down," you say. So you do. Together, you draft a strange kind of book, half truth, half myth. Her childhood, your voyages, every forbidden glance, every letter. The flower, the chocolate, the scroll. You even include the part where you broke a man's nose mid-typhoon, which she insists on downplaying. She calls it a minor correction, a fringe tidbit for you. During Japan's Meiji era, memory books became unexpectedly popular among women of former samurai families who weren't allowed to publish formally, but shared hand-copied stories in underground salons. Some of them still circulate today, anonymously, like whispered heirlooms. One morning, she doesn't come for tea. You wait and wait. Then someone knocks. A neighbor. She'd fallen. Nothing dramatic. Just a moment. A stumble on the temple stairs. Her ankle turned badly. You find her inside wincing but laughing at the way you panic like a man trying to plug a hole in a ship with rice. "You're not going to lose me that easily," she teases, but her voice sounds thinner now, and you know. She's still strong, still clear, but time has caught up. Your days grow slower. You speak more and move less. She gives you something then, a tiny wooden lantern, etched with her family crest. "For when I'm not there to light it," she says. You place it on your windowsill. Every night it flickers. Every morning it's the first thing you check. She declines gently like dusk. One morning she asks to go to the coast. You hire a rickshaw, wrap her in blankets. She watches the waves and says nothing for a long while. Finally, "Do you remember the first time you saw me? Blue parasol," you say, "like a tiny sky." She nods. "I nearly dropped it. I was so nervous." You reach for her hand. It's cold. A few days later, she asks you to bring the scroll fragments, the ashes you buried beside the shrine. Together again, you burn a pinch of them. No ritual now, no ceremony, just two old souls letting go of what they once carried too tightly. And on the last night, she says, "Don't wait too long." You try to smile. For what? For the next story. You bury her in a place with no name, beneath the trees behind the shrine, marked only by a single stone with one character, "Remember." You stay a little while longer. Finish the book. Pack the lantern. Then one morning, as mist curls through the harbor, you sail west again, not to forget, but to carry. Because she kept the promise. And so did you. Now the sails are drawn, the coast has faded, and the air grows still. You sit beneath a soft sky, waves curling gently along a distant shore, and let the years drift backward like smoke from a shrine's ember. Her voice lingers in the corners of your memory, quiet, unhurried, timeless. It's not the sound that matters now, but the weight behind it. The certainty that something once impossible lived and in living left its mark on you. You aren't a young sailor anymore. You aren't that girl with ink-stained hands either. But something of them still moves within you. A note folded carefully, a pressed flower preserved, a promise made without hope and kept despite it. Not all love stories need a happy ending, but this one had a true one. As you close your eyes, let the image settle. A lantern flickering faintly on a windowsill, never fully dark. The garden still, the tea cooling, the silence no longer empty. Let yourself rest there for a moment longer. You are safe, you are remembered, and somewhere beneath cherry blossoms no one else can see, she is still waiting. Not for rescue, not for return, just for the story to be told. And now it has.